Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances, always Sri Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. So we can start. This section is about Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's conversation. Specifically, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving the knowledge about the nature of the absolute truth and how Vedanta Sutra describes devotion service like that. That is the section. When are you ready? You can start reading, Mati.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna, everybody. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutare Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devim Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Advaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Advaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. We are reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, Chapter 6, Text 149. How greatly fortunate are Nanda Maharaj, the cowherd man, and all the inhabitants of Rajabhumi. There is no limit to their fortune, because the absolute truth, the source of transcendental bliss, the eternal supreme Brahman, has become their friend. Text 150. The Vedic Apanapada mantra rejects material hands and legs, yet it states that the Lord goes very fast and accepts everything offered to him. Text 151. All these mantras confirm that the absolute truth is personal, but the Mayavadis, throwing away the direct meaning, interpret the absolute truth as impersonal. Text 152. Are you describing as formless that Supreme Personality of Godhead whose transcendental form is complete with 6 transcendental opulences? Text 153. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has 3 primary potencies. Are you trying to prove that he has no potencies? Text 154. The internal potency of Supreme Lord Vishnu is spiritual, as verified by the Shastras. There is another spiritual potency known as Kshetra Jnana, or the living, Kshetra Jana, or the living entity. The third potency, which is known as nescience, makes the living entity godless and fills him with fruitative activity. Text 155. O king, the Kshetra Jana Shakti is the living entity. Although he has the facility to live in either the material or spiritual world, he suffers the threefold miseries of material existence because he is influenced by the avidya, nescience, potency, which covers his constitutional position. Text 156. The living entity covered by the influence of nescience exists in different forms in the material condition. O king, he is thus proportionately freed from the influence of material energy to a greater or lesser degree. Text 157. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is Satchit Ananda Vigraha. This means that he is originally has 3 potencies: the pleasure potency, the potency of eternality, and the potency of knowledge. Together, these are called the Chit potency, and they are present in full in the Supreme Lord. For the living entities who are part and parcel of the Lord, the pleasure potency in the material world is sometimes displeasing and sometimes mixed. This is not the case with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because he is not under the influence of the material energy or its modes. Text 158. The Supreme Personality of Godhead in his original form is full of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. The spiritual potency is in these 3 portions, Satchit and Ananda, assumes three different forms. Text 159. The three portions of the spiritual potency are called Hildayani, the bliss portion, and Sandhini, the eternity portion, and Samvit, the knowledge portion. We accept knowledge of these as full knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 160. The spiritual potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead also appears in three phases: internal, marginal, and external. These are all engaged in his devotional service and love. Text 161. In his spiritual potency, the Supreme Lord enjoys 6 kinds of opulences. You do not accept this spiritual potency, and this is due to your great impudence. Text 162. The Lord is the master of the potencies, and the living entity is the servant of them. That is the difference between the Lord and the living entity. However, you declare that the Lord and the living entities are one and the same. Text 163. In the Bhagavad Gita, the living entity is established as the marginal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yet you say that the living entity is completely different from the Lord. Text 164. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego are my eightfold separated energies. Text 165. Besides these inferior energies, which are material, there is another energy, a spiritual energy, and this is the living being. O mighty armed one, the entire material world is sustained by the living entities. Text 166. The transcendental form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is complete in eternity, cognizance, and bliss. However, you describe the transcendental form as a product of material goodness. Text 167. One who does not accept the transcendental form of the Lord is certainly an agnostic. Such a person should be neither seen nor touched. Indeed, he is subject to be punished by Yamraj. Text 168. The Buddhists do not recognize the authority of the Vedas. Therefore, they are considered agnostics. However, those who have taken shelter of the Vedic scriptures yet preach agnosticism in accordance with the Mayavada philosophy are certainly more dangerous than the Buddhists. Text 169. Srila Vyasadeva presented the Vedanta philosophy for the deliverance of conditioned souls, but if one hears the commentary of Shankaracharya, everything is spoiled. Text 170. The Vedanta Sutra aims at establishing that the cosmic manifestation has come into being by the transformation of the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 171. The touchstone, after touching iron, produces volumes of gold without being changed. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead manifests himself as the cosmic manifestation by his inconceivable potency, yet he remains unchanged in his eternal transcendental form. Text 172. Shankaracharya states that the theory of transformation presented in the Vedanta Sutra implies that the absolute truth itself is transformed. In this way, the Mayavadi philosophers denigrate Srila Vyasadeva by accusing him of error. They thus find fault in the Vedanta Sutra and misinterpret it to try to establish the theory of illusion. Text 173.
We can pause there, Mate.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Prabhu.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so now let me briefly give the context and then we can go back to the verses again. So basically, where we are in the context wise is Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is in the house of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. They both met, and then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was trying to be convinced by his brother-in-law, Gopinath Acharya, that that he is Supreme Lord, but he did not accept it. But the context was that Sarvam Bhattacharya gave elevated to seat to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then he started to speak about Vedanta Sutra for 7 days total. And then at the end of 7 days, he asked you, it seems like, I don't know whether you are understanding or not understanding, because you're not giving any indication whether you'll accept it or not accept it, like that. Then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started to speak that I understand it very well. Vedanta Sutra actually has a proper meanings, but you are clouding the meaning with your own commentary because you're referring to Shankaracharya's Sharirika Bhashya commentary, like that. So you're clouding the meaning, like that he described. So now in this section, let me go, yeah. So he starts to give you the proper explanation of Vedanta Sutra. For that, he first starts to say that you are not taking the direct meaning that is evident from Vedanta Sutra, but you're trying to give interpreted meanings, like that he said. For that he said, Vedas are themselves the greatest pramana, Shruti pramana. So we can take them directly like that. But like how sometimes cloud covers the vision of sunshine from us, so similarly, you are covering the direct meaning, like that he said. And then after that, he starts to describe how absolute truth is personal with spiritual qualities and potencies also. So, because Mayavadis, they think Supreme Lord doesn't have any potencies. They don't believe Supreme Lord has potencies. They don't believe Supreme Lord has qualities, like that. So now Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is establishing from the last few verses how Supreme Lord is personal and he has a lot of potencies, like that. So in that context, we heard how Supreme Lord is existing in three cases. We heard, like for creation, everything is coming from Supreme Lord. For maintenance, Supreme Lord is needed. And for, after annihilation also, after the whole creation is annihilated, that time also everything goes back to Supreme Lord also. So like that we heard. And then he described how before the creation, Supreme Lord existed. That means only after creation started, all the material things existed. This is very close to what we were discussing in the morning also, Srimad Bhagavatam 11th canto. So before creation, nothing material existed. So that means Supreme Lord has transcendental form. That is the thing that he starts to describe. And then he said in the last couple of verses that how we need to we cannot easily understand the meaning of Vedanta Sutras and Upanishads. That is why Supreme Lord gave us through Vyasdeva the Puranas, because they will explain the Vedas, Vedic Upanishads nicely so that we can understand the meaning properly. That's one point we understood. Another thing is, by the mercy of devotees and spiritual master only, we can understand the meaning of the Vedas or Vedic scriptures, like that. That's the other point mentioned. Now going to 149th verse from today now. He's glorifying that how fortunate Nanda Maharaj and the Gopa friends of Krishna are, so that way they could become a friend of him, like that he is describing, glorifying. And then he says, when the Vedic statement says, Apani Pada, that means that is rejecting material hands and legs, he's saying. Remember we discussed yesterday also, how when Supreme Lord is described as not having legs, but he can wash fast. Supreme Lord has eyes, but he doesn't have eyes, but he has a vision, like that. It's described that is extraordinary. He doesn't have material limbs like that, like us, material hands, material legs, material eyes, like that. His eyesight is seeing past, present, and future also, like that we discussed. Inside the heart also he can see, every corner of the universe he can see, every corner of the creation he can see, like that. And even legs also, he can go as fast as he can, like that. He doesn't need legs like us that are limited by, we get tired after walking for some distance, like that. That's what is being described here. That is a person, like that. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is describing in several ways how Supreme Lord is a person, like that. Now, he says all these mantras confirm that the absolute truth is personal, but the Mayavadis throw away the direct meaning and interpret the absolute truth as impersonal, is saying. So the purport clarifies how Bhagavad Gita, by quoting a Svetasvatara Upanishad, how the word Purusha is used there. And also Arjuna describes in Bhagavad Gita in 10.12, Purusham Sasvatam. That means you are the original person, like that. So here Svetasvatara Upanishad is also saying Purusham Mahantam. So that's why that is confirming that is Krishna himself. Because Arjuna was talking to personally Krishna and saying, you are the original Purusha. So now Upanishad doesn't have direct reference to Krishna, but is also referring to Purusha. That means it's Krishna, like that Sri Prabhupada purport is clarifying for us. Then he underscores the point that we cannot simply understand by reading all scriptures or Vedas by ourselves. We need the mercy of a devotee. And when we approach a bona fide speech master and surrender to him, then we can understand Krishna as a person. Otherwise, so many ways it is indicated in Vedas that Supreme Lord is a person, but we may not still understand it unless we get the mercy of a devotee like that. That's the point Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is describing. Because remember, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was a great scholar, so he knows a lot of Vedas, but still he could not understand that Supreme Lord is a person. That is because he did not receive mercy of devotee at that time. Of course, now he will receive the mercy of his brother-in-law, Gopinath Acharya. That's why he's getting the mercy of Lord Chaitanya directly now. We'll find out that at the end of this chapter. So now he says, are you describing the Supreme Lord as formless? Even though he has a transcendental form that is full of 6 opulences, like that is describing. Now, yeah. And the next verse 153. Oh, I think I should share the verses also. Let me share the verses. Yeah, here is describing how the Supreme Lord has 3 primary potencies. What are those? We will describe in the next verses. And you are saying there are no potencies for Supreme Lord like that. So there's no purport for this verse. Next verse is saying the 3 potencies, the internal potency. What are the 3 potencies? Internal potency of the Supreme Lord is that is spiritual potency. And then another spiritual potency is Kshetragna, the living entity or Jiva. And the third potency is the Nishyans or Avidya Shakti, which makes the living entity godless and fills him with fruit activity by giving us forgetfulness of our original constitutional position. That's how we are engaging in fruitive activities like that. So actually this whole section is talking about the potencies. We'll go through some more. Basically, remember here, Kshetragna, Jiva is living entity is described as Kshetragna. Now, so even though living entity can live in the material world or spiritual world, but because of his because he is suffering from the threefold measures of material existence, because he is influenced by the third potency, Avidya Shakti. That's why he is covered by of his constitutional position. That is servant of Krishna. He forgot that point, like that is describing. So now, why is that happening? Why is it Avidya potency covering him? Because of living entity's rebellious tendency only. That because he wants to forget Krishna only, not the other way around. Because Avidya Shakti wants to cover us, that's why we forgot, not like that. Because we want to forget. That's why Krishna arranged potencies like that. So now, let me see, any purport is here. Yeah, no purport. And once here, the living entity is covered by the influence of Nishyans, that is Avidya Shakti. He exists in different forms in material condition. That means different species he takes, either a plant body, animal body, human body, demigod body, like that. So that's why he is thus proportionately free from the influence of material energy to greater or lesser degree. How is that? Let us say somebody is in lower forms, like a plant body, aquatics body, insect body. Then they have higher amount of covering of avidya. It seems. That's what purport is clarifying for us. Then it's very hard to get out of avidya influence for them. But when they little bit more better or less covering is in the human form of life. That's why we have the ability to understand that our constitutional position and awaken our Krishna consciousness, and then go back to spiritual world also. And much higher beings have fully awakened Krishna consciousness also, like that is described. Now, next verse. Here, now he's describing how the Supreme Lord is Sachidananda Vigraha. Now, remember, so far he described the 3 potencies: how internal potency, marginal potency or Jiva, and then external potency or external energy or Maya Shakti or Avidya Shakti, like that. Now he's going to add three more things. He's talking about different potencies now. Sat, Chit, Ananda, these three potencies now. He says Supreme Lord has originally three potencies: the pleasure potency or Ananda potency, and the eternality potency or Sat potency, or the Chit potency, knowledge potency. So you notice this is called Sat, Ananda, Sat, and Chit here. But then all three of them are also called as Chit again. So knowledge potency itself is called Chit, but all of three potencies together are also called Chit. Those two are given like that based on the context. Here it's clearly described. So all these potencies are there in Supreme Lord. Whereas when Mayavadis they are saying Supreme Lord doesn't have any potencies and qualities, that is incorrect. He is establishing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then he says for living entities, the pleasure potency is sometimes displeasing and sometimes mixed. Mixed means sometimes little displeasure comes, sometimes little pleasure comes, like that in the material world. Whereas Supreme Lord is not influenced by any material energy or material modes. So he doesn't have any that changes like displeasing or pleasing, mixed, like that. He doesn't have any experience like that. That's what is described here. Now, here, Supreme Lord in his original form is full of Sat, Chit, Ananda, eternality, knowledge, and bliss. The spiritual potency in these three potencies assumes three different forms is describing. What are the three different forms? That is, that's described in the next verse. Basically, the bliss portion, Ananda portion is called Radhini Shakti, eternity portion is called Sandhini Shakti, and the knowledge portion is called Samved Shakti. So, when we understand these three, all these potencies, then we can say that we understood Supreme Lord fully. If Mayavadis are saying they understood Supreme Lord as Brahman, but they don't understand the potencies, that's not full knowledge Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is describing here. No, let me see if there's any purport. Yeah, I think that's it. Therefore, no purport there. Oh yeah, purport, one sentence purport, essentially saying to acquire the knowledge of Krishna or Supreme Lord, we need to take shelter of Samvit potency of the Lord, because Samvit potency of the Lord is giving the knowledge. That's what is described. So that means, let's go to 160th verse. Here, the spiritual potency of the Supreme Lord also appears in three phases. What are those? Internal, marginal, external. These he described again earlier already. That internal Shakti sometimes is called as Antaranga Shakti, Vishnu Shakti, or Shakti, like that. Marginal potency is called Tatastha Shakti, Jiva Shakti, Kshetragna Shakti, like that. And then external Shakti, we heard about Avidya potency, Avidya Shakti, Bahiranga Shakti also is another word used in Bhagavad Gita. And then Maya Shakti also is another word used, like that. Then, in his spiritual potency, the Supreme Lord enjoys 6 kind of opulences. Now he's describing other qualities the Supreme Lord has. Because Mayavadis think there's no opulences at all, there's no qualities for Supreme Lord. He's saying, no, that's not true. He has 6 opulences. You don't accept the spiritual potency, and this due to your great impudence, is saying Chaitanya Mahaprabhu directly. So now he's starting to describe how there's a difference between Ishvara or Supreme Lord and the Jiva or the marginal potency, all of us like that. So he's saying the Lord is the master of all the potencies, whereas the living entity is a servant of the potencies. That is the difference. However, you declare that the Lord and the living entities are one and the same, you're saying, because Mayavadis have 2 main misconceptions. One is that we forgot, but actually we are also Supreme Lord. That's one misconception they have. Second misconception they have is Supreme Lord doesn't have any potencies, and Supreme Lord, when he comes to incarnate here, they think he's influenced by Maya also. That's a misconception they have also. So it's clarifying the one misconception that they think that Supreme Lord and Jiva are of same nature. Same nature in terms of quality only, but not quantity. You'll clarify that in the coming verses. So now in the 163 verse, yeah. So 160 verse in the Bhagavad Gita, living entities establishes marginal potency of Krishna. Yet you say that living entity is completely different from the Lord. Completely different means separate from the Lord. Not like that. Actually, it's just a potency. One of the potencies of the Supreme Lord himself is part and parcel of Krishna. That's what is describing in this verse. Go to the next. Yeah. Yeah, this purport is clarifying how we as Jiva are qualitatively one with Krishna and quantitatively we are very small like that. Of course, that is also describing how Sri Chaitanya Chaitamata and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu described this philosophy as Achinta Beda Beda Tattva. That means we are simultaneously one with Krishna and different from Krishna. How? By qualitatively one and quantitatively very, very small like that. Then he starts to describe other potencies of Krishna. How the material elements we see, earth, water, fire, air, ether, the gross bodies, elements, right? And also subtle body, mind, intelligence, force, ego, are my eightfolded separated energies. Bhagavad Gita, he's quoting a verse from Bhagavad Gita, basically this one, from 7.4 and 5. So then, he says the transcendental form of Krishna is complete in Satchidananda, eternity, cognizance, and bliss. Cognizance means knowledge. However, you describe this transcendental form as a product of material goodness. So that's not correct understanding is describing. He says, now one who does not accept the transcendental form of the Lord is certainly an agnostic. Let me look at it. Yeah. So now this is actually next section is starting. Now he described so far how Krishna is personal, Supreme Lord is personal, how Supreme Lord has potencies, how Supreme Lord is different from Jiva or living entity, how Supreme Lord is not controlled by any material modes, whereas Jiva is controlled by material modes like that. All that is described now. Positive knowledge. Now he describes how the atheistic philosophies like Shankaracharya philosophies, Mayavadi philosophy, or Buddhist philosophy, how they are incorrect, how they are false. That's what is going to prove now, next set of verses. He's saying, one who does not accept the transcendental form of the Lord is certainly an agnostic. Agnostic means somebody who says, I can neither confirm that God is there or not there. I cannot prove anything, basically. They want to stay in a position where they don't want to accept anything, basically. So if somebody doesn't accept the transcendental form of the Lord, then they're simply agnostic. Such a person should be neither seen, we should not even see such a person, we should not touch such a person. And he is subjected to punishment by Yamaraja because it's sinful, is offensive, like that. So who is such a person? Purport is clarifying for us. This is the Mayavadis who don't accept the form of the Lord like that. How Lord has supreme form, transcendental form, they don't accept it. So such a person, we should stay away from them. The purport is clarifying that such a person, what happens to such a person, Mayavadis, they keep on going in the material world. They can never exit easily unless they get an association of devotee and they accept devotional service, of course. Now, 168th verse, the Buddhists. Now, in this verse, is describing about the Buddhists. How Buddhists, they do not recognize the Vedic authority. So that's why they are agnostics. That means they cannot confirm anything. But then Mayavadis, on the other hand, they say they are taking shelter of Vedic scriptures. They're reading Vedic scriptures, they're reading Vedanta like that. But they also preach agnosticism in accordance with Mayavadi philosophy. And actually, Mayavadi philosophers are more dangerous than Buddhists. Why? Because they're saying they're accepting Vedas, but still giving wrong interpretation of Vedas. That's even more dangerous. If you don't accept Vedas, that is better, at least, for Buddhist side. But Mayavadis are more offensive, is describing Krishna here. So now, actually, this is an elaborate purport in this verse that describes the distinction between Buddhist philosophy and Mayavadi philosophies. So essentially, one is that one nice understanding given here is that how Mayavadi philosophers consider that they are above the karma kanda, but actually they are lost in speculation. There's very little difference between voidism and impersonalism. Prabhupada is writing here in the purport. Because Buddhist philosophy is at the end of life, they think they will stop all material activities. There's voidism. Everything is void. There's no spiritual world. There's no spiritual activities. That's what their understanding. But Mayavadis, they have at least they understand that there is something spiritual beyond material. But their understanding of spiritual is incorrect. Why? They think spiritual means something we can experience materially, that is material, and anything spiritual means something opposite to that. That is their understanding, speculation. Meaning, if we are able to see some form, some person, we can see with our eyes, that means that is material. That means God should be spiritual. That means you should not be able to see with eyes, even when we are elevated like that. That's their misunderstanding. They'll negate, this is called Neti philosophy. They negate everything to find what is spiritual like that. So that's also incorrect understanding, because they're negating that Supreme Lord has a transcendental form, Supreme Lord has qualities, potencies, activities like that. So they are also having incorrect understanding like that is described. So now, another point discussed in the purport is that Mayavadis say we are cultivating knowledge. Whenever cultivating knowledge means we are the person who are trying to know the knowledge, number one entity. Then second entity is the knowledge itself that we are trying to gain. Third entity is knowledge of what? Knowledge of the object we're trying to gain about. These three entities are there. But Mayavadis combine these three things, it seems, in their explanations. Then what is the point? Then there's no reality in the way of understanding philosophy. They can never be rescued like that unless they get association of devotees. Because they're not combining, they're looking at all of them together. They're never trying to understand what is the object of their worship. They're not separating that out. They're combining them, all of them. They cannot see any time together unless they get a special mercy of devotees like that. Now, here he says, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying, actually, Vyasadeva presented Vedanta philosophy for the deliverance of conditioned souls. But if one hears the commentary of Shankaracharya, everything is spoiled. So this is stressed so many times by Prabhupada in many purports, even in this purport also. So we should not hear Mayavadi commentaries on various scriptures. So then, yeah, also in this purport, Prabhupada is writing how Mayavadis want to merge into the Brahman. So by doing that, they're trying to deny their individuality. So that is the opposite of Bhakti Yoga philosophy. How we are one entity, Krishna is one entity, we're trying to serve him. But that serving is not there, because their conception is they want to negate, they don't want to have this individuality anymore like that. So that's why it's opposite to Bhakti philosophy, Prabhupada is writing in purport. So last verse for today, here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying Vedanta Sutra aims at establishing the cosmic manifestation as coming to being by the transformation of inconceivable potential of the Supreme Lord. That means whole creation came because of the transformation of the energies of the Supreme Lord. So this is explained in Adi Lila also, if you remember. This is called Shakti Parinamavada, like that. Meaning the creation is the transformation of the energies of Supreme Lord. Not that Supreme Lord became the creation, so that's why there's no Supreme Lord there. That is their thought process of Mayavadis. That's not correct understanding. Correct understanding is Supreme Lord is still there in spiritual world, and with his energies are being transformed to create all these things like that. That is the right understanding. So we'll hear more in the next verse also, this topic, Shakti Parinamavada, this is called. That means transformation of energy, like that. We'll pause here. And Sri Chaitanya Tamtamrita ki jai, Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami ki jai, Sri Prabhupada ki jai. Let's offer obeisance to all the devotees of the Lord. Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kupasindubhyevacha Paditana Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Thank you so much, devotees. Hare Krishna.